I live in a quiet suburb just outside Chicago, where everything feels predictable, almost too predictable. The houses are all painted in shades of beige and gray, their lawns perfectly manicured as if competing for some invisible prize. My name is Emma Carter, and I'm 34 years old. On paper, my life looks perfect. A cozy home with 3 bedrooms, a golden retriever named Max who wags his tail every time I walk through the door, and a husband, Daniel, who works hard to provide for us. But lately, that perfection feels hollow. It's not that Daniel doesn't care. He does, in his own way. He brings me coffee on Sundays, fixes things around the house when they break, and always remembers our anniversary. But somewhere along the way, we stopped talking about anything real. Conversations now revolve around grocery lists, bills, or what show we should binge watch next. It's comfortable, sure. But comfort can be suffocating when you start questioning whether this is all there is. And then there's Lucas. Lucas was my first love, the kind of person who made me feel like the world was full of possibilities. We dated for 2 years back in college before life got in the way. His family didn't approve of me because I wasn't serious enough, whatever that means. And eventually, the pressure became too much. After we broke up, I convinced myself it was for the best. I moved on, met Daniel, got married, and built this life. Yet, no matter how many times I tell myself I made the right choice, I can't help wondering what might have been. A few weeks ago, I found myself scrolling through Instagram late at night. A habit I know isn't healthy, but can't seem to quit. That's when I saw him. Lucas had posted a photo of himself standing by Lake Michigan, smiling like he hadn't a care in the world. Something about that smile tugged at me, stirring memories I thought I'd buried long ago. Before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked on his profile and started looking through his pictures. He looked different now, older, more polished, but still undeniably him. The next day, an alert popped up on my phone. Lucas had followed me back. Then came the message. "Hey, Emma. Long time no see. How've you been?" My heart skipped a beat. What did he want? Was this just a casual check-in, or was there something more behind it? I hesitated before replying, unsure of what to say. In the end, I settled for something neutral. "Hey, Lucas. I'm good. How about you?" What I didn't expect was how quickly the conversation escalated. Within minutes, he suggested meeting up. "Just as friends," he said. A part of me knew it was a terrible idea, but another part, the restless, curious part, couldn't resist. So here I am now, sitting at the kitchen table while Daniel scrolls through emails on his laptop across from me. I haven't told him about Lucas reaching out. I don't know why. It's not like I've done anything wrong, but the thought of bringing it up makes my stomach twist into knots. As I stare out the window at the neatly trimmed hedges lining our driveway, I wonder if maybe I've been fooling myself all these years. Maybe happiness isn't something you find once and keep forever. Maybe it's something you have to chase, even if chasing it means risking everything. I told Daniel I needed a weekend away, just one weekend, to clear my head. He barely looked up from his laptop when I mentioned it, nodding absently as if he hadn't even processed what I'd said. "Sure," he muttered, his eyes still glued to the screen. "Do whatever you need to do." That was the thing about Daniel. He trusted me completely. Or at least, he used to. The thought of lying to him made me feel sick, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth either. How could I explain something I didn't fully understand myself? So instead, I packed a small suitcase, booked a train ticket to Chicago, and left early Friday morning without giving him any real details. The ride to Chicago felt longer than I remembered. Every click of the train wheels against the tracks seemed to echo the questions swirling in my mind. What am I doing? Is this worth it? What happens when Daniel finds out? But beneath the guilt was another feeling. Excitement. A strange, tingling anticipation I hadn't felt in years. When I arrived, Lucas was waiting for me at Union Station. He stood there with his hands shoved into the pockets of his leather jacket, looking exactly like the man from his Instagram photos, but somehow more real. His smile widened when he saw me, and for a moment, I forgot why I'd been so hesitant to come. "Emma," he said, pulling me into a hug before I could react. It wasn't awkward or forced. It felt natural, like slipping into an old sweater that still fit perfectly. We spent the afternoon walking along the lakefront, catching up on everything we'd missed over the past decade. He told me about his failed relationships, his struggles with work, and how he'd recently ended things with someone because she wasn't you. My stomach flipped at those words, but I brushed them off, chalking it up to nostalgia talking. By dinner time, we were seated at a dimly lit restaurant overlooking the city skyline. The conversation turned deeper, almost uncomfortably so. "You regret leaving me, don't you?" Lucas asked suddenly, cutting straight to the heart of things. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Lucas, No, it's okay," he interrupted, leaning back in his chair with a faint smirk. "You don't have to say it. I already know." His confidence unnerved me. This wasn't the same guy I'd dated in college, the boy who wrote me poems and got nervous around my parents. This was someone else entirely, older, sharper, more self-assured. And while part of me admired that change, another part felt uneasy, like I was treading water in unfamiliar territory. As the night wore on, I found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions. There was a pull toward Lucas, a magnetic connection I couldn't deny. But every time I thought about Daniel, about the life we'd built together, a wave of guilt crashed over me, reminding me of what I stood to lose. By the time I got back to the hotel room that night, I was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in my head. Had I made a mistake coming here? Was this trip really about reconnecting with an old friend? Or was it something more selfish? And then there was Daniel. Sweet, trusting Daniel, who had no idea where I was or who I was with. Just thinking about him sent a fresh pang of guilt through me. But as much as I wanted to believe this trip would stay between Lucas and me, deep down, I knew secrets never stayed buried forever. Forever. The train ride home was unbearable. Every rattle of the tracks felt like a countdown to Judgment Day, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel already knew, or at least suspected, something wasn't right. When I walked through the front door, Max greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, wagging his tail so hard he nearly knocked over the umbrella stand. But Daniel barely glanced up from his phone. "Hey," he said flatly, not even looking at me. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "Hey," I replied, forcing a smile as I set my suitcase down. "How was your weekend?" "Fine," he said curtly, still scrolling through whatever he was reading. Then, after a pause that stretched just a little too long, he added, "Yours?" My heart skipped a beat. Did he know? Was this some kind of test? "It was good," I lied, avoiding his eyes. "Just what I needed. A little break." He didn't respond, but the tension in the air was suffocating. For the rest of the evening, we moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when necessary. It was clear something had shifted between us, though neither of us acknowledged it. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I replayed every interaction with Lucas in my mind. Had I said too much? Done too much? The guilt gnawed at me relentlessly, making sleep impossible. The next morning, things got worse. I went to unpack my suitcase, only to realize I'd left the receipt for my hotel room tucked inside. Panic surged through me as I frantically searched for it, praying Daniel hadn't found it. But when I opened our bedroom closet later that afternoon, there it was, lying on top of his neatly folded shirts. Oh God, I wanted to scream, or cry, or both. Instead, I stood frozen, clutching the receipt in trembling hands while my mind raced with excuses. Sure enough, Daniel confronted me that evening. He held up the crumpled piece of paper, his expression unreadable. "What's this?" he asked quietly, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "It's nothing," I stammered, trying to sound casual despite the lump forming in my throat. "Just a place I stayed during my trip." "A hotel?" he pressed, his jaw tightening. "Why would you stay at a hotel if you were visiting a friend? Why not crash at their place?" "I didn't want to impose," I shot back, hating how flimsy the excuse sounded even to my own ears. Daniel stared at me for a moment, his eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't ready to give. Finally, he shook his head and turned away. "You're lying," he said simply, his voice low and hollow. "And I don't understand why." Things spiraled quickly after that. Over the next few days, Daniel became distant, withdrawn in a way I'd never seen before. He started working late, claiming he had projects to finish, but I knew better. He was avoiding me. Then came the calls from Claire, my best friend since college. At first, she acted normal, asking how my weekend had gone and whether I felt refreshed. But by the third call, her tone changed. "Emma, is everything okay?" she asked one evening, her voice tinged with concern. "Daniel called me yesterday. He seemed upset." My chest tightened. "What did he say?" "He asked if I knew anything about your trip, about who you were really visiting." My blood ran cold. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that I don't know anything," she snapped, frustration creeping into her voice. "But Emma, you need to talk to him. Whatever's going on, it's tearing you two apart." She was right, of course, but how could I explain something I didn't fully understand myself? How could I justify actions I already regretted? To make matters worse, strange things began happening. Late at night, after Daniel had gone to bed, my phone would buzz with missed calls from unknown numbers. When I answered, no one spoke. Just silence on the other end, heavy and unsettling. At first I thought it might be telemarketers or wrong numbers, but then I noticed a pattern. The calls always came between midnight and 2 a.m., and they always stopped as soon as I picked up. One night, unable to take it anymore, I decided to trace the number using an app I downloaded. To my shock, the caller ID revealed it belonged to Lucas. My hands shook as I dialed his number back immediately. "Lucas," I hissed when he answered, keeping my voice low so Daniel wouldn't hear. "What the hell are you doing calling me at all hours? And why aren't you saying anything?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then, finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said softly, almost sheepishly. "I guess I got carried away. I miss talking to you." His words sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't harmless curiosity. It was obsession. And suddenly I realized I'd underestimated how dangerous this situation had become. Not just for me, but for everyone involved. By the end of the week, Daniel had stopped speaking to me altogether. He slept on the couch, ate meals alone, and avoided eye contact whenever possible. Our once happy home now felt like a battlefield littered with unspoken accusations and broken trust. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to confront Lucas directly. Maybe because deep down, I feared he'd reveal more than I could handle. Or worse, expose secrets I desperately wanted to keep buried. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. One morning, I woke up to find a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. Daniel's handwriting was neat and precise, just like him. I can't do this anymore. I'm staying at Mark's place for a while. We need space. That was it. No explanation, no room for negotiation. Just 6 short sentences that felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at the note for what felt like hours, my mind racing but unable to process anything beyond the weight of those words. Space? What did that even mean? Was this temporary, or was he done? With me, with us, with everything we'd built together. For the first time in years, I called Claire and begged her to come over. She arrived within 20 minutes, carrying a box of tissues and a bottle of wine. He left, I said before she could even sit down, tears streaming down my face. He actually left. Claire pulled me into a hug, letting me cry until I couldn't anymore. When I finally calmed down enough to speak, she asked the question I'd been dreading. Emma, what really happened in Chicago? Her tone wasn't accusatory, but it still stung, because deep down, I knew she deserved an answer, even if I didn't want to give one. So I told her everything. Or at least, as much as I could without making myself sound completely reckless. I explained about Lucas reaching out, about the trip, about the hotel receipt Daniel found. But I left out the parts that painted me in the worst light. The way Lucas had looked at me, the things he'd said, the pull I'd felt toward him despite knowing it was wrong. When I finished, Claire sighed heavily, shaking her head. Emma, I get that you were feeling lost, okay? But lying to Daniel? Going behind his back like this? That's not you. Or at least it shouldn't be. Her words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were harsh, but because they were true. This wasn't who I was, or at least who I used to be. Somewhere along the way, I'd let restlessness cloud my judgment, and now I was paying the price. Over the next few days, I tried reaching out to Daniel repeatedly. Texts, calls, emails. He ignored them all. Eventually, I drove to Mark's apartment, hoping to catch him in person. But when Mark answered the door, he shook his head apologetically. He doesn't want to see you right now, Emma, he said, gently. Give him some time. Time. Everyone kept telling me to give him time, but how much time did I have before he decided I wasn't worth fighting for? Meanwhile, Lucas continued to haunt my life. After the mysterious late-night calls stopped, I thought maybe he'd backed off. But then came the email. It arrived in Daniel's inbox late one night. A message from Lucas, addressed directly to him. Somehow, Lucas had managed to track down Daniel's work email, probably through social media. I never should have accepted his follow request. The subject line read, "The truth about Emma." My stomach sank as I realized what must be inside. Frantic, I called Daniel immediately, but he didn't pick up. Instead, he sent a single text. We need to talk tomorrow. Don't try to explain anything. Tonight. The next day, we met at a coffee shop near his office. A neutral location, as if we were strangers hashing out business instead of a married couple trying to salvage what was left of our relationship. I got your ex-boyfriend's email, Daniel said flatly as soon as I sat down. His expression was unreadable, his voice devoid of emotion. What did it say? I asked weakly, already knowing the answer. That you went to Chicago to reconnect. That you stayed at a hotel with him. That you two talked about your marriage, falling apart and how unhappy you are with me. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. It's not true, I protested, my voice trembling. Yes, I went to see him, but nothing happened. He's exaggerating everything because he's bitter. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made me squirm. Then why lie about it, Emma? Why not just tell me the truth from the beginning? I was scared, I shot back, tears welling up in my eyes, scared of losing you, scared of admitting I was unhappy, scared of facing the fact that maybe I made a mistake letting him go all those years ago. As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Daniel's face hardened, his jaw tightening as he processed what I'd just admitted. "So that's it," he said quietly. "You're still hung up on him." "No," I insisted, reaching across the table to grab his hand. "That's not what I meant. I love you, Daniel. You're my husband, my partner. Lucas is just a ghost from my past, a stupid, selfish decision I'll regret forever." But Daniel didn't seem convinced. He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. "I need more time to think," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Don't call me again until I reach out." And with that, he walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me sitting there alone, clutching my untouched latte like it might somehow hold the answers I so desperately needed. By the end of the week, Daniel had officially moved out. Boxes disappeared from the house, replaced by empty spaces that echoed louder than any argument ever could. Max wandered around aimlessly, looking for Daniel in every room, his tail drooping when he realized Daniel wasn't coming home. Every night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision that had led me here. If only I hadn't gone to Chicago. If only I'd been honest with Daniel from the start. If only I hadn't let nostalgia blind me to the life I already had. But regrets don't fix anything. And as the days turned into weeks, I began to realize something terrifying. Daniel might never forgive me, and worse, I wasn't sure I deserved it. I couldn't let it end like this. Not without answers. Not without understanding why Lucas had done what he did. Or at least, that's what I told myself as I boarded another train to Chicago. This time, the journey felt heavier, like the weight of everything I'd done, and everything I'd lost, was pressing down on me with every mile. I replayed Daniel's face in my mind over and over again, the way his eyes had hardened when he looked at me during our last conversation. It was a look I didn't recognize, one that made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage. When I arrived, Lucas was waiting for me at the same spot by Union Station. He smiled when he saw me, but there was something different about him now. A tension in his shoulders, a flicker of unease behind his confident demeanor. "You came back," he said, pulling me into a hug before I could protest. "Yeah, I did," I replied stiffly, stepping out of his embrace. "We need to talk." We walked to a nearby cafe, the same place we'd eaten dinner during my first trip. But this time, the atmosphere felt suffocating instead of nostalgic. I got straight to the point. "Why did you email Daniel?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. Lucas hesitated, fiddling with the sugar packet on the table. For a moment, he looked almost guilty, but then his expression shifted, and the mask of charm slipped back into place. "I wanted him to know the truth," he said simply, shrugging as if it were no big deal. "The truth," I snapped, leaning forward. "You twisted everything, Lucas. You made it sound like something happened between us when it didn't." He raised an eyebrow, smirking faintly. "Did it really not happen, Emma? Or are you just telling yourself that to make yourself feel better?" My cheeks burned, both from embarrassment and fury. How dare he twist my words like that? "Nothing happened because I chose my husband," I shot back, my voice rising. A few heads turned in our direction, but I didn't care. "You manipulated the situation, Lucas. You used me to hurt Daniel, and in the process, you ruined my marriage." For the first time since I'd known him, Lucas looked genuinely surprised, maybe even a little ashamed. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Okay, fine," he admitted reluctantly. "Maybe I went too far. But you can't act like you're completely innocent here, Emma. You came to see me, remember? You let me believe there was still something between us." His words hit hard, not because they were untrue, but because they forced me to confront the part of myself I'd been trying so desperately to ignore. The part that had allowed this mess to happen in the first place. "Yes, I came to see you," I admitted quietly, staring down at my hands. "But I didn't come to destroy my life. I came because I was confused and lonely and stupid enough to think reconnecting with you would somehow fix things. Instead, it only made them worse." There was a long silence after that. Neither of us spoke for several minutes, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Lucas sighed, shaking his head. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said softly. "I guess I thought if I could drive a wedge between you and Daniel, maybe you'd realize you belong with me instead." The confession stunned me, not because it was unexpected, but because it confirmed everything I'd feared. Lucas wasn't just reckless, he was calculating, and I'd been naive enough to fall for it. After our conversation, I returned home, feeling more conflicted than ever. Part of me wanted to hate Lucas for what he'd done, but another part couldn't help blaming myself. After all, none of this would have happened if I hadn't gone to Chicago in the first place. Determined to set things right, I sat down and wrote Daniel a letter. A real one this time, not some half-hearted text or voicemail. I poured my heart into it, explaining everything. Why I'd gone to see Lucas, how I'd underestimated the consequences, and most importantly, how sorry I was for hurting him. "Daniel," I began, my pen trembling as I wrote. "I know I messed up. I know I broke your trust in ways I may never be able to repair, but please believe me when I say I never stopped loving you. Everything I did was selfish and misguided, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it if I lose you forever." I ended the letter with a simple plea. "Please, just give me one more chance to prove I'm worth forgiving." I left the letter on his desk at work, knowing he'd find it eventually. Then I waited, for days, for weeks, with no response. In the meantime, I tried to focus on rebuilding my life. I started taking freelance design projects again, something I hadn't done since before Max was born. At first it felt strange, like picking up a hobby I'd abandoned years ago, but slowly, it began to fill the void inside me. Creating something beautiful, even if it was small, gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't realized I'd lost. I also started seeing a therapist, something Claire had suggested months ago, but that I'd resisted until now. Talking to someone outside, my circle helped me untangle the web of emotions I'd been carrying around for so long. Still, nothing could prepare me for the day Daniel finally called. It was late afternoon when my phone buzzed. His name flashed across the screen, and for a moment, I froze, unsure whether to answer. "Hello?" I said cautiously, my heart pounding. "Hey," he replied, his voice hesitant, but steady. "I got your letter." "Oh." My throat tightened, making it hard to speak. "And?" There was a pause, long enough to make my stomach churn. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Emma," he said finally. "What you did, it shattered something in me, something I'm not sure I can get back." Tears streamed down my face, but I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I understand," I whispered. "But," he continued, his tone softening slightly, "I do want to try. For both of us. If you're willing to put in the work, I think we owe it to ourselves to see if we can fix this." Relief washed over me, but it was bittersweet. This wasn't a happy ending. It was a second chance, fragile and uncertain. And while I knew it wouldn't be easy, I also knew it was more than I deserved. Just as I began to hope things might improve, I discovered something that shattered whatever fragile optimism I'd clung to. While cleaning out Daniel's old office, files, he'd asked me to sort through them while he worked remotely, I stumbled upon a folder labeled Personal. Inside was a stack of papers, including a lease agreement for an apartment under Natalie's name. Natalie, his coworker. The woman he'd mentioned casually in passing once or twice, but whom I'd dismissed as just a colleague. Suddenly, pieces clicked into place. His late nights at the office, his evasiveness whenever I asked about work, the way he seemed distant, even before Lucas entered the picture. My hands trembled as I stared at the document, nausea rising in my chest. Daniel wasn't just giving me space, he was moving on, and I had no one to blame but myself. I sat on the floor of Daniel's office, surrounded by scattered papers, clutching the lease agreement like it was a verdict I couldn't escape. The room felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in around me. My mind raced, replaying every interaction Daniel and I had since he moved out. The guarded conversations, the forced politeness, the way he always seemed just slightly out of reach. Natalie. Of course it was Natalie. She'd been there all along, quietly slipping into the cracks of our broken marriage while I was too blind or too guilty to notice. For a moment, anger surged through me, a hot, searing rage that made my fists clench and my vision blur. How dare she? How dare he? After everything I'd done to try to fix things, after every apology, every attempt to make amends, this was how they repaid me? But then the anger faded, replaced by something colder and heavier. Shame. Because deep down, I knew I had no right to feel betrayed. I was the one who'd created the fracture in our relationship. I was the one who'd left Chicago with secrets clinging to me like shadows. And now, those shadows had grown into monsters that neither Daniel nor I could outrun. I didn't confront Daniel, not immediately. Instead, I spent the next few days wrestling with what I'd discovered, torn between two paths, revenge or redemption. Part of me wanted to expose their affair, to force Daniel to feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. I imagined marching into his workplace, confronting him in front of everyone, humiliating him the way he'd humiliated me. But another part of me, the quieter, more rational part, knew that revenge wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't bring Daniel back. It wouldn't erase the mistakes I'd made. All it would do is drag both of us further into bitterness, leaving scars that might never heal. So instead of lashing out, I channeled my energy into something else. Writing. Late at night, when the house was silent except for Max's occasional snores, I sat at my desk and poured my heart onto the page. At first, it started as a personal journal entry, a way to process my emotions without drowning in them. But as the words flowed, I realized I wasn't just writing for myself anymore. I was writing for anyone who'd ever felt lost in a relationship, anyone who'd let fear and loneliness drive them to make choices they regretted. The article took shape slowly, each sentence carefully crafted to balance honesty with vulnerability. I wrote about the monotony of suburban life, the ache of feeling unseen, the temptation of revisiting the past. I wrote about Lucas, about Daniel, about the secrets that had unraveled my world. And most importantly, I wrote about forgiveness, not just for others, but for myself. When it was finished, I hesitated before hitting publish. Once it was out there would be no taking it back. People would judge me, criticize me, maybe even hate me. But I also knew that keeping it hidden wouldn't change anything. So I pressed send, closed my laptop, and waited. The response came faster than I expected. Within hours, my inbox was flooded with messages, from strangers, from friends, from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some offered condolences, others shared their own stories of heartbreak and healing. A few accused me of being selfish, of throwing away a good thing. But the overwhelming majority thanked me for speaking openly about something so many people experience, yet rarely discuss. One comment stood out among the rest. "Thank you for reminding me that relationships are hard. Work, not fairy tales. Your story made me realize I need to stop taking my partner for granted and start communicating honestly. You're braver than you think." Reading those words brought tears to my eyes, not because I craved validation, but because I finally understood why I'd written the article in the first place. It wasn't about vindication or self-pity. It was about connection, about finding meaning in the chaos. As the weeks passed, I began to rebuild, not my marriage, but myself. I threw myself into my freelance design work, landing clients I never thought possible. I joined a local art class, where I met people who saw me not as a failed wife, but as an artist with potential. I even started volunteering at an animal shelter, walking dogs and playing with cats, whose unconditional love reminded me of simpler times. Daniel and I spoke occasionally, though our conversations were brief and awkward. He confirmed my suspicions about Natalie, admitting that they'd grown close during his time away from me. He didn't apologize, but he didn't have to. I already knew this wasn't just his fault. "I hope you find happiness," I told him during one of our final calls. My voice broke, but I meant every word. "Me too," he replied softly. We agreed to file for divorce amicably, splitting assets and custody of Max fairly. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. By the time the papers were signed, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not because I was happy about losing Daniel, but because I knew I'd done everything I could to salvage what was left of our dignity. Months later, as I stood in my new apartment unpacking boxes, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see guilt staring back at me. Instead, I saw resilience, growth, hope. I still miss Daniel sometimes, the laughter we used to share, the dreams we once built together. But I also knew that holding on to the past wouldn't change the future. Life isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about learning from them, growing stronger despite them. And as I hung a painting I'd created above my couch, a vibrant swirl of colors representing chaos transformed into beauty, I smiled. Maybe happiness doesn't come from finding someone else. Maybe it comes from finding yourself.